It's State of the Water, where we bring policymakers, movers and shakers from across the country to discuss issues on the national level that impact you locally here in Hampton Roads. I'm your host, award-winning Dr. Eric Claville. Sundays at 1:30 on Blazing Hot 91. State of the Water, where policymakers, movers, and shakers meet. An initiative of the Center for African American Public Policy at Norfolk State University. It's almost 2021, and in the Commonwealth, that means one thing, that we'll be going to the polls to elect our 74th governor of Virginia. Now, even though the election is over a year away, the field for the Democratic nominees is filling up fast. It's State of the Water, and I'm your host, award-winning Dr. Eric Claville. And as promised, we're here to bring you movers and shakers and policymakers to you, the community. And today we have one of the candidates who just announced his candidacy at historical Fort Monroe in here, Hampton, Virginia. And that's Lieutenant Justin Fairfax. Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, welcome to State of the Water.
Thank you so much for having me on. Really honored to be with you, Dr. Claville, and thank you to all the wonderful listeners in Norfolk State and around the Commonwealth.
Look, you know, it's been a wild year for 2020. Many say it's definitely one for the record books. You know,
right.
COVID-19 and all of the hysteria that we have, and of course, all the things that are happening, the great things that are happening in the Commonwealth. But before we get to your historical announcement for run for governor, I just want to give an opportunity to allow you to have any words. We just learned about the passing of the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg after her courageous battle with cancer over 2 decades. Of course, it hit home for the entire country. Anytime we lose a leader on our federal level who's been serving for a long time, no matter what side of the aisle that you're on, you know, it really hits our country hard. What are your thoughts about her passing, her life, and anything you'd like to add?
Well, thank you so much for raising Dr. Ginsburg up in this moment, and I want to frankly reach out to her family with prayers and thoughts, and as much as she meant, you know, to this nation and to the Supreme Court, you know, obviously she meant so much to the people close to her and who loved her, and so want to, you know, pay our respects to them and also recognize in this moment how bright a light she continues to be for our nation. This was a true champion for justice, for equality, for fairness, for the truth, and we really need to follow her example in our nation, I think, to guide our path forward. This is someone who, in Justice Ginsburg, had incredible courage, and I think that's the thing that really sticks out to me. She was a brilliant jurist, a wonderful person, a forward thinker, but all those things, I think, were illuminated by her courage. She was willing to stand up when it wasn't popular, when others might have taken a different view. She's known as one of the great dissenters that the court has ever had. And one thing that I love that she said once, when she talked about her reputation for writing these really eloquent and powerful dissents to the court's majority opinions, she said that dissents speak to a future age. And she said that that's the dissenters' hope, that they are writing not for today, but for tomorrow, that eventually their view would become the prevailing view. And so I think that really, to me, encapsulates who she was. She was, in so many ways, ahead of her time. She challenged the conventions of her time when it came to issues around gender and equality, when it came to the lack of justice in our criminal justice system. She was someone who was against the death penalty, something that I am also against the death penalty. And also, on a personal note, I share with her a Lions pedigree in that we both went to Columbia Law School. And so I'm very proud of that connection to her as well. So just an extraordinary person. It also highlights what's at stake in this presidential election here now in just over 40 days on November the 3rd. We have to have people come out and vote. The future of our nation is at stake. And Justice Ginsburg is really the best in many ways of who we are. And we've got to honor her commitment to justice and fairness and equality by what we do with our democracy in this moment.
You know, you're exactly right. This is a moment in our society where, you know, all of us have to step up. Vanina, as
Right.
as a woman, in this time period in which women are making great gains, what do you see as the opportunity now for women with the passing of Justice Ginsburg?
Well, Eric and Lieutenant Fairfax, again, thank you for being on the show. I'm Benita Adams, and it is so important. As I was looking through reading various articles about her, it really talked about how women gravitated toward her, even young women, even some girls. Thinking that she is a hero of sorts and that she has set the bar high and that they want to be like that. Where do you think that came from? That women really, really did honor her.
You know, I think it just showed that you can be strong.
Oh yeah,
you know,
definitely.
you can be strong in the midst of a lot of very hard issues, and again, it gave a lot of encouragement to a lot of young women now coming up. So we definitely see that, and her life speaks for itself. But at this point, I want to segue to your announcement. You know, for running for governor
Yeah.
of the Commonwealth of Virginia. You know, it's like I said, 2020 has been a wild year, but 2021 is around the corner. You know, what really went through your assessment and your mind when determining that this is the next step for me?
Yes. Well, thank you. And we did announce actually last weekend, we formally launched our campaign for governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. We did it at really two historic sites, one here in Fairfax where we live, the historic Fairfax County Courthouse, and launched it there, which is actually a location that houses the freedom documents of my great-great-great-grandfather, Simon Fairfax. And that's actually how I got my last name, just like the county. He was freed in the year 1798 by the Ninth Lord Fairfax in Virginia, in Fairfax County, about 5 minutes from where I now live. And so it's that history that we wanted to honor and to talk about where we are in this moment in our history. And then the next day we went to Fort Monroe in Hampton, and we were at that sacred site where, of course, 401 years ago, the first enslaved Africans were forced to land at Fort Monroe in Hampton off the White Lion. And so we wanted to also recognize and to really commemorate and consecrate that journey, that powerful journey here in this nation. So it really talks about and speaks to the moment that we are in as a nation. We're at another incredible juncture in our nation's history. And I think that really helped inform my decision and our decision to launch a campaign for governor, because we've got to take our Commonwealth and our country on a very different course. And we've got to think boldly and differently. We've got to prioritize justice, fairness, and opportunity. It is at the heart of the challenges that we are facing right now as a nation. When you look at the triple crisis of the COVID-19 pandemic, which you mentioned, the economic crisis that has been concomitant with that, and then, of course, the crisis in racial tension and racial oppression in our nation, punctuated by the horrific deaths of George Floyd, with a knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds in Minneapolis, and Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky, and Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia. And so we are at this moment in our history where we have got to answer the call of history,
right,
and rise above what we have seen, in our contemporary politics. And so we've got to have a new agenda in what I call the first year of the next 400 years of Virginia and of America. And that's really what we're focused on, the policies that are bold, that deal with issues of justice, fairness, and opportunity, that deal with education, healthcare, housing, and policing and criminal justice, the four pillars of the next 400 years agenda. And I think that's really what this moment in our history demands, and that's what we are presenting to the people of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
757-823-9110. That's 757-823-9110. Today we have Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, who's just announced his candidacy for governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. 757-823-9110. What questions do you have for the Lieutenant Governor? Do you have questions about his record while he was Lieutenant Governor? What about his plan for the Black community and the Commonwealth of Virginia? 757-823-9110. Lieutenant Governor, you mentioned the four pillars of the next 400 years. But during your tenure as lieutenant governor, you started to make inroads in each of those pillars. Can you talk to us about some of the legislation and some of the issues that you've championed in the last several years?
Absolutely. I'm very happy to. And again, those 4 pillars are around education, healthcare, policing and criminal justice reform, and housing. And let me just take out a couple of brief examples, and happy to talk about others. When you talk about healthcare, my proudest day as lieutenant governor was in 2018 when I cast the tie-breaking votes in the Senate of Virginia to expand Medicaid here in the Commonwealth. And as a result of those tie-breaking votes that I was able to cast as lieutenant governor, today over 462,000 more Virginians have health insurance in the Commonwealth of Virginia since those tie-breaking votes were cast. Last year in 2019, Virginia led the nation in expanding health care coverage to our citizens. So this is a transformational, a landmark achievement when you talk about our healthcare system and allowing more of our citizens to have the security of health insurance to take care of their families so that they don't have to go bankrupt from medical emergencies, so that they can get proactive care, so they can have longer and healthier lives. So when you talk about health care, again, that is something that is a vote in a series of votes that I will always cherish and look to, and the impact that it's had and will continue to have on the lives of hundreds of thousands of Virginians is going to be very powerful going into this next 400 years. When we talk about policing and criminal justice reform, we are now in the middle of a special session where I'm presiding over the Senate. We're passing landmark policing and criminal justice reform legislation out of the Senate. We've banned chokeholds, banned no-knock warrants. Again, those having been central in the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. We are making sure that officers who use excessive force are able to be fired and decertified so they can't go and work somewhere else and terrorize another community. We're ensuring that we have statewide standards so that the people are getting equal justice across the Commonwealth of Virginia. So we're doing that right now in this moment. And also in housing, I've dealt with the high eviction rates in the Commonwealth and gotten legal changes and millions of dollars poured into dealing with evictions relief. And then with regard to education, we are paying our teachers more, and my plan to go forward is to pay them above the national average. Right now they're paid about $8,000 less than the national average. So we'll make record investments there, and to rebuild all of our older schools throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia with our 40-30-10 plan to rebuild all public schools that are older than 40 years old with a $30 billion with a B investment to do that within 10 years. And that will be transformation on the educational front. So these are all things that provide the oxygen of opportunity to everyone, all 8.5 million people here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, but that also deal with some long-standing issues around racial injustice and oppression that are 401 years in the making.
Wow. 757-823-9110. 757-823-9110. You know, that plan is just not a plan, but is extremely bold. I think a lot of us look at education, especially here, being on the campus of Norfolk State University, historically Black College University, look at education as being one of the major focal points of where we need to go.
That's right.
And and that plan is one that I think anybody can put a stamp on and say, hey, let's do it, let's run for it, because if we do, if we rise in education, then all of us rise.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And one of our
areas.
key tenets is that we rise together. And I'll tell you, Norfolk State, an extraordinary institution of higher learning. I was very proud to have been the commencement speaker at Norfolk State back in 2018. And what I noted in that commencement speech is something that's driving a lot of this policy. I noted the fact that, people say we're in a very challenging time when you talk about budgets and fiscal issues and, how are we going to start to make these intergenerational investments. I noted the fact that Norfolk State was started and founded during the Great Depression.
That's right. 1935. That's right.
1935. So you had people who had the foresight and the vision to plant those seeds in the ground at that time when many might have counseled against it, and it's blossomed now into the great institution of Norfolk State, which has produced some of the greatest leaders that we've ever had in Virginia and around this country. And so right now, that's what we talk about when we talk about having vision the future is now, being bold in this next 400-year moment, not simply doing the same old things and trying to get the same old results. And so we've got to make those kinds of investments. We also, before the COVID-19 pandemic, announced record investments in our public HBCUs here in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Yes.
$300 million. Of course, as we go through the budgeting cycle, we'll be making those adjustments. But I'm still committed as we come out of this COVID-19 pandemic to making sure that we reach or exceed those levels of commitment to our HBCUs, to Norfolk State, to Virginia State in particular, because, again, they are going to lead us into the future. They're going to continue to develop the workforce that will help our economy grow, and they're going to deal with some of the incredible historic injustices,
right,
as they've done since their founding. And so these are the bold proposals that we are focused on, in elevated politics that gets us to a different place, and not mired down in what can't be done, but instead what can and should be done.
I think that's a very important point that we talk about funding of HBCUs, more specifically, as you mentioned, our state HBCUs, Virginia State, and here at Norfolk State University. Just this week, the executive director for Thurgood Marshall College Fund talked about 2020 being a historic year for donations to HBCUs, almost $500 million, which is surpassed any 10-year giving that has been donated to HBCUs. Because finally, I believe, just as you just noted, that society is starting to see the true value that we've all known.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Look, we've known from day one the value of our institutions, the value that we give our students and send them out into society as leaders. And, to make changes in areas, to be bold. When we look at our leaders from whether it be the civil rights area, leaders in entertainment, leaders in government, leaders in medicine, leaders in law, there is an HBCU stamp either directly on them or behind them through their family and that push and support. So the funding and support that you're talking about from the state, I'll be one of the first ones to endorse that.
Excellent. And I appreciate your leadership on this and also your extraordinary president, Dr. J. I want to thank her, your board of visitors, and again, the leadership of the faculty at Norfolk State. Kalita Fairfax, I have to shout out Dr. Kalita Fairfax, who is an extraordinary scholar and has done so much great work on behalf of the state. You all have led the way and have shown, as you mentioned, the world the extraordinary value that our HBCUs bring, and they have achieved extraordinary results without getting nearly the amount of funding that they historically have deserved. And so I'm very proud to see what type of investments are being made at this moment, but we have to sustain them. This has to be a generational commitment to dealing with these issues. And again, you talk about the stamp that HBCUs have put on American history and on the future. I follow in the footsteps as only the second African-American ever elected statewide in the history of the Commonwealth of Virginia of the great Doug Wilder, who, of course, went to Virginia Union and Howard University Law School. Both of my grandparents are Howard graduates. We now have a Democratic nominee for vice president in Senator Kamala Harris, who's a Howard University graduate. We have so many extraordinary examples of how HBCUs have literally changed the course of history in America and in the world. And as we mourn the recent passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we also honor her connection to another great justice, Justice Thurgood Marshall, who's one of my heroes, also a graduate of HBCU, Howard University in Charleston, Houston, the social engineers that he and others created at that amazing institution that literally made it possible for us to do so many of the things we're able to do now in society to rise and to bring people along with us. So the story of the HBCU is really the story of America at its best. And so we have got to now make that commitment in financial and fiscal terms to our institutions going forward into this next 400 years. And I'm committed to doing that right now as Lieutenant Governor and certainly as Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Lieutenant Governor Benita Adams here. Again, thank you for being on our show. And
Benita, thank you.
You're welcome. So, again, you talk about these pillars, and it is so important. Having taught on the college level for over 35 years, I get it. And these next 400 years. So How is it that we impart, even if we're not in the classroom, to our young people for the next 400 years to understand that these are the things that are going on, but more importantly, what is going to change, how they can be a part of that?
Absolutely. Our young people, and I was actually just on a amazing call yesterday, a Zoom call with some Jack and Jill young people up in Prince William County in Manassas, and I was just so inspired by having the opportunity to talk with them and impart some knowledge to them. We have got to ensure that they understand where we are in this critical moment in history, and so much of it, I believe, is also understanding how far we've come and the sacrifices that the generations before us have made to allow us to have the opportunities and the freedoms that we currently enjoy. We are not where we need to be as a nation, or certainly in the case of African Americans. We have so much further to go, but we have come so far because of those sacrifices. And so that's why, as I mentioned, we kicked off our campaign and journey at the Fairfax County Courthouse, remembering, in my case, that journey of my family from slavery here in the Commonwealth of Virginia to my now serving as the second in command of the state, and how many people had to sacrifice to make that possible. And then an even greater sacrifice from Fort Monroe, people who were forced to land 401 years ago in 1619, and now taking a journey and all the accomplishments that African Americans have in Virginia and around this nation and around the world, and how in North America that began at that sacred and historic place. And so I think about the investments that people have made in those key pillars, in education, making sure that African Americans in particular can get an education, despite all the efforts over the course of history to deny an equal education, first to deny any education, but then an equal education, and certainly a superior education like you would get now at our extraordinary HBCUs in Virginia. And I remind people that we have 5 HBCUs in Virginia. I believe they're the 5 best in the country. And I often, as I travel around the country, I get people who would try to challenge me on that any day of the week. But if you look at Hampton and Norfolk State, Virginia State, Virginia Union, and University of Virginia in Lynchburg, these are extraordinary institutions and have produced extraordinary leaders. So those investments in education have been transformational. We need to make more investments in housing that provides the security and the opportunities for intergenerational wealth. We need more wealth in the hands of African-American entrepreneurs and small business owners. My wife is a dentist, has her own dental practice, which we purchased about 13 years ago. That was a wonderful opportunity for us, but we want to make sure that there are small business owners of every kind that are able to grow, particularly in the African-American community. And you've got to have health in order to make all those things work as well. So for our young people, it is understanding exactly where we've come from and therefore what they can do. There's nothing they're limited in doing in their lives if they understand that the people who came before them faced far greater odds, I believe, but then excelled in the face of so much adversity, and that these young people are the beneficiaries of what I call that spiritual wealth, and that they now have an unlimited future, and that we want to make sure they activate those futures because they are extraordinary, and now is an extraordinary time when we need them to be our leaders.
757-823-9110, 757-823-9110. We have with us Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, who's just announced his candidacy for governor of the Commonwealth in 2021. What questions do you have for him about his plan for the African-American community, about what he'll do in the first 100 days? 757-823-9110. Lieutenant Governor, you're just not the only one running here. The field is filling up. It seems like everybody's throwing their hat in. And right now, I think there's 5 candidates for the slate of the Democratic nominee. We have a couple of that recently dropped out, and 2 more who are looking at potential jumping in. So what separates you? If an average person is looking at that list of nominees, what would you say were the 3 top things that separate you from the rest of the candidates?
Absolutely. I would start just by saying it's my general philosophy in politics and public life. I've never run against anyone, and I never will. I've always run for something. I've run to lift people up, to put forward a set of positive proposals and a vision that's really about them and about their families, and not about me and any other candidates. So I bring a different philosophy to politics, where I don't tear other people down, I really am all about lifting up, 8.5 million Virginians. So I think that's one thing that I bring to the table. I've been blessed to get incredible support by voters in the Commonwealth of Virginia during my time in public life. In 3 statewide campaigns, I've never gotten less than 48% of the statewide vote in each of those campaigns. And so to have that support of nearly half the electorate has really been extraordinary. And then, of course, when we were elected in 2017 to lieutenant governor, I got the most votes in the history of the Commonwealth of Virginia, 1.36 million votes for lieutenant governor. And so that was an extraordinary night, and also a wonderful endorsement by the people of the Commonwealth of Virginia that they wanted something different, that they wanted change, they wanted a bold vision. And so that's really what we bring to the table from that perspective. And then when you talk about policy, I've laid out by far the boldest policies on those issues of education and healthcare and housing and policing and criminal justice reform in the race. Our 40-30-10 education plan has been lauded as one of the most progressive and transformational education plans in Virginia history. And again, this is a plan that would rebuild and reimagine all of our K-12 public schools around Virginia that are at least 40 years old, with a $30 billion investment, and that's billion with a B, and to do that within 10 years. And so if you think about all the places around the Commonwealth of Virginia, this is urban, rural, inner city places that have for so long been neglected. We have schools, as you know, in Hampton Roads and in Richmond and in Southside and Southwest, where ceilings are literally falling down, where the bathrooms don't work, where there's no technology, where the students don't have access to iPads, particularly in this COVID-19 pandemic, which has now set them even further behind,
right?
Because they can't access that virtual instruction. And so this will change the opportunities available in education for the next 50 to 100 years. And I believe that we have to make these kinds of investments right now. Along with that, I mentioned raising teacher pay at or above the national average. We in Virginia, one of the wealthiest states in the nation, and yet don't pay our teachers in a way that reflects their value and our resources. And then also, this is a very unique proposal that we put forward. We want to guarantee every young person in the Commonwealth of Virginia, starting out between the ages of 14 and 24, a summer job or summer enrichment opportunity. This is something that's modeled after a program where I got my first job growing up in Washington, D.C., the Mayor's Youth Summer Works program, which took a whole bunch of young people, gave them the opportunity to earn some money, to start a great work ethic, and kept them out of trouble, and allowed them to continue to advance their futures. And so now imagine having that all throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia, that every young person will have a job or some sort of summer enrichment opportunity, whether it's in sports or athletics or the arts, in the STEAM field, to make sure that they are advancing themselves during that time frame. So this is a very bold set of proposals that's about creating a brighter future and more opportunities for every single one of us. And again, dealing with issues around historic injustice. And I've never been afraid to stand up to injustice. And I think that's what also separates me. My first week and a half on the job as lieutenant governor, as you likely recall, I was asked to honor Confederate Generals Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson, the Senate of Virginia, in an adjournment that had been done for the last 150 years. And I was told that was the tradition.
Yes.
Well, I decided I would not observe that 150-year-old tradition, and so would break with it. I stepped down from the dais in protest. I sat on the bench reserved for our pages, and I'm proud to say that just a couple of years later, that 150-year tradition is no longer observed in the Senate. So it broke 150 years of a tradition, and that to me is what being bold, having courage, and changing the narrative for the next 400 years in Virginia is really all about. And we're seeing these Confederate monuments and memorials coming down all throughout Virginia.
Yes.
Right now, in this moment, Hampton Roads, Charlottesville, Richmond, Northern Virginia, Southwest, Southside. And the fact that 2 years earlier we were taking that stand, I think shows the type of leadership and the type of courage that we have to build a new Virginia for the next 400 years. That'll be a light and a signal to the rest of the country.
Lieutenant Governor, you're exactly right. This is a time period where we have to be bold. No longer can we sit on the sidelines and say, hey, let someone else do it. This is our time. This is our moment. And it's something that I call the moment of truth. to really stand up to historical injustices, but also current injustices, to do the right thing for our society. Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much for joining us on State of the Water. We wish you the best in your candidacy and your run. And thank you for serving the Commonwealth of Virginia as Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you. God bless you, and look forward to being on with you again. JustinFairfax.com to learn more, and look forward to an incredible next 400 years working together.
You got it. Thank you, sir.
God bless you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, Benita, again, as we promised, for this show, we'll bring movers, shakers, policymakers to the community to answer questions that really are relevant to us. So we thank our listeners. Keep in mind, every Sunday at 1:30 here on 91.1 Blazing Hot, you can listen to State of the Water, where we bring the movers and shakers to you. This is your host, Dr. Eric Claville, and we'll see you next Sunday.